Uh-oh. Spidey is in chains, and the tarantula and the jackal shove him off that fatal bridge where Gwen Stacy was killed. Although she's back, well, her clone is back. But is this the end of Spider-Man? Probably not. Welcome to Kevin's commentary on comics. It's issue 148 from September 1975 of The Amazing Spider-Man, Jackal, Who's Got the Jackal? Written by Jerry Conway with art by Ross Andrew and cover art by Gil Kane and John Romita. So yes, Spidey is bound up in chains as the tarantula and the jackal kick him off the bridge. And we see Jackal waving bye-bye to Spidey as he falls, and the jackal lets out a kind of crazy hee. This guy is so much like the Green Goblin. You really think that maybe it's Norman Osborn under that mask, don't you? Well, we'll get into that later. First, though, Spidey needs to get out of this mess, and he does so thanks to his trusty web shooters. Now, not to stop down again, but why don't villains just take the web shooters off of Spider-Man before sending him to his doom? It can't be too hard to figure out that he has them, because I'm sure they kind of bulge out of his gloves in some way. Although, honestly, we never actually see it when we look at his costume. But surely they are there, and the villains must know about it. Even if they thought Spider-Man generated these webs naturally, why not duct tape his entire hands and wrists? Just bound him up in duct tape so he couldn't fire them. Why? Well, because it's a comic, and the hero should always win. That's why. Anyway, while Spidey struggles with his chains, the jackal, the tarantula, and a brainwashed Gwen Stacy clone take off thanks to a quickly put together flying harness that Gwen was carrying with her the entire time. Now, I'll give points to creativity here. That was a nice way to hide an escape plan. Good going, Jackal. Back down at the water, some police officers do rescue Spider-Man from where he was hanging on a web, but as one cop is about to take off Spidey's mask, another says not to do it because, hey, TV cameras are waiting on the dock, so hey, we can make this a big, huge media ploy. Fortunately, Spider-Man was only faking being unconscious and breaks free of the cops and gets away, much to the chagrin of the cop who really wanted to make a name for himself. So about 30 minutes later, Peter walks up to his apartment where Mary Jane is waiting. No matter what happens to Spider-Man, he always seems to find his clothes, doesn't he? I could probably go back and find out, when he changed prior to encountering the tarantula and the jackal and finding out if it was even conceivable that he could find his clothes, but, I don't need to dive too deep into this stuff now, do I? Anyway, Mary Jane, after her pep talk with Aunt May last issue, I believe, has decided to fight for Peter and issues an ultimatum that it's either Gwen or her. Fortunately, Peter is so wonked out he barely acknowledges MJ and slams the door on her. That's not really the best move there, is it, Peter Parker? Later, Ned Leeds comes by while Peter is in the bathtub, and they dope out the facts that they know about the clone of Gwen Stacy. Now, Peter remembers that as part of a class project in Professor Warren's biology class, each student gave cell samples, including Gwen. That's it! They needed to go see Professor Warren to find out what happened with those samples. But Pete needs to get dressed first. So they meet up with Professor Warren, who remembers where the samples were stored, but when he goes to check on them, they are all gone. Professor Warren figures that his assistant, Anthony Serba, took the samples, but he disappeared some months ago. Aha! This must be who the Jackal is. Ned and Pete split up to track down Serba, and we get another adios amigo in the panels of Spider-Man. The Punisher said this a few issues ago, and I guess Pete picked up on that phrase. So, of course, Pete changes into his Spidey costume and finds Serba's apartment in an old factory. It's always an old factory. Since the lights don't work, he uses his Spidey signal, which, by the way, was always one of my favorite gadgets that Spidey had. In fact, all of the gadgets Spider-Man had were cool. The web shooters, spider tracers, the spider signal. Years later, if you're not aware, in the storyline where Dr. Octopus takes over Peter Parker's brain and body, he kicks up the gadgets into high gear, and I know we're kind of in the 70s right now, but I do need to review that storyline at some point in time, because it really was a good one. I'm not kidding, honest. So Peter looks around and comes across none other than the tarantula. The two fight it out, and Spidey manages to get him outside, where he tricks the tarantula into jumping, feet first of course, because of those little spiky boots, through a billboard and into a water tower where he gets stuck, and Spidey knocks him out in a huge deluge of water. Apparently you just have to get the tarantula wet to defeat him, because that's basically how Spidey beat him in their first meeting. Spidey drags Tarantula back to the factory, where he is struck from behind by the Jackal. But how? Spider-Man has his spider sense, right? Why didn't it alert him to the Jackal sneaking up behind him? Why? Well, because his spider sense only protects him against enemies and not friends. Friends like Professor Warren. Yes, Professor Warren is the Jackal. Okay, so maybe this is not a big reveal, as I'm sure most of you, if not all, already knew it was Professor Warren all along. So I'm Kevin, and that was my commentary. So this issue was mainly centered around figuring out who the Jackal was, and sure, there was a fight between Spidey and the Tarantula, but the unmasking of the Jackal was certainly the big deal here. Now, again, I wonder how this played out when it was first published. Now, I read this so long ago, I don't remember my reaction. Plus, I think these actually came out before I became a regular reader of Spider-Man, and I had no idea at that point what a back issue was. I mean, back then, if you missed it on the spinner rack at your local 7-Eleven, you really had to find someplace that actually sold old comics, and this was before comic book stores were a big player in the industry, so that really wasn't an easy task. So, was this a huge reveal? Did readers think this was Norman Osborn the whole time? Did they, think it was somebody else? It certainly could have been Norman Osborn, that's for sure. And actually, I thought the character of Professor Warren was introduced around the same time that Jackal was first introduced in issue 129. But after doing a little research, it seems that his actual first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man number 31 from 1965, which also featured the first appearance of guess who? Gwen Stacy. I never knew this. What a great tie-in, even though at the time, Professor Warren was a high school professor, and obviously there's more to his origin story than moving up from high school to college, but not really necessary information here right now. Okay, he apparently was an assistant to the High Evolutionary at some point, but at any rate, it was a nice bit of using old characters in a new way, and, such is the greatness of living in the Marvel Universe. But what happens next issue? Sure, we know Professor Miles Warren is the Jackal now, but what are his plans? Why did he create the Gwen Stacy clone, and what is his beef with Spider-Man anyway? Well, we'll have to dive into that next time as we reach the final chapter of Spider-Man's first encounter with the Jackal. Don't miss out. Subscribe to my channel right now. And hey, be sure to like and share this video, won't you? So until next time, today was made to be great, so let it be so, and I will see ya.